Okay, hello again. This is part 2 of the Wednesday, September 21st video lecture for social research design. Before we move on to the relevant slides in the PowerPoint presentation for Chapter 9, I'd like to backtrack a bit in the Project 3 instructions to this fourth bulleted point under Part B of creating your survey. It says for each question, select multiple choice, only one answer. So these are closed-ended questions. You provide the attributes or the answer choices. People who take your survey can only choose one answer per question. Type in each of your 10 questions with 5 answer choices for each one. Click regularly on Save Changes to save your progress. Okay, well, we already looked at one guideline from Chapter 9 for these questions, namely closed-ended questions. They have to be closed-ended. We talked a little bit about some problems that can present. So how are we going to avoid those problems? How are we going to come up with 10 really good closed-ended questions for our survey? Let's look at the PowerPoint slides for Chapter 9 for that. So, here's some more guidelines for asking survey questions. We talked about things being exhaustive last week in class. Response categories should be exhaustive. What does that mean? They should include all possible responses that might be expected, so that everyone taking your survey can mark one of your answer choices, so that at least one of your answer choices applies to everyone who takes your survey. So how can you do this? You can ensure this, as point 1 says, by using other as an option on your survey, so that anyone who doesn't fit into the other answers you've given can check off other. For the variable income level, usually an independent variable, the responses, see here that you have these ranges of incomes: 0 to 20,000, 20,001 to 40,000, 40,001 to 60,000. That would not be an exhaustive set of attributes or responses for the question, what is your income level? Why not? I'm going to pause a second so you can think about that. Why would that not be exhaustive? Well, the range is too narrow, right? A lot of people make more than $60,000. It's just too narrow a range. So that's not an exhaustive set of responses. Besides being exhaustive, your set of answer choices should be mutually exclusive, because you're only allowing the respondent to choose one response for each question. The respondent should not feel compelled to choose more than one. There should be one response among all of the ones you give, all of the answer choices you give, that applies best to the respondent. So how do you do this? You ask yourself whether a person could reasonably choose more than one answer. So if you have, again, a question about income level, and your answer choices are 0 to 20,000, 20,000 to 40,000, 40,000 to 60,000, look at the overlap here. If you have these answer choices, would someone who makes $20,000, would they check off the first response, 0 to 20,000, or the second response, 20,000 to 40,000? Both apply, because you have 20,000 in both. Same with the 40,000, same with the 60,000. You can't do that. Those are not mutually exclusive responses because they overlap. Okay, you want to make the items clear. This is key. You want to make sure your survey questions are clear. What's the best way to do that? Have someone else in your house, in your household, have a friend, have me, someone look at your survey questions, look at your survey before you send me the link to post on Blackboard, before the students in your class take your survey. Make sure that the questions read clearly. They may make sense to you because you've worked on them so long, but you should have a fresh pair of eyes look at them. One way to make questions clear is to avoid double-barreled questions. What's that? It's explained in Chapter 9. Here's an example. The U.S. should abandon its space program and spend the money on domestic programs. There's a complex sentence that's really making two different points. Some people may agree that the U.S. should abandon its space program, but not agree with spend the money on domestic programs, or vice versa. Someone might disagree that the U.S. should abandon its space program, but agree that the U.S. should spend the money on domestic programs. So those are two different points you're making. It's really two different sentences without the and, so that's a double-barreled question. There are two different points, and your respondents may not be able to choose just one response to that statement. So avoid those kinds of questions. Keep it simple, keep it clear, not complex sentences that make two or more points. Of course, your respondents must be competent to answer. In other words, they must understand your survey. They must know what you're talking about. You must think of your audience when you write your survey so that you can ask them relevant questions, things that they will generally know about and have answers to. And that goes along with this slide. Questions should be relevant. Respondents must be willing to answer. And indexes and scales we're not going to talk about today in this video lecture. They're explained at length in Chapter 6. They're also in these PowerPoint slides that I'm going to post. So feel free to look at those and ask me questions about them. You don't have to have an index or scale in your survey responses. It depends on what you're asking. Technically, strongly agree to disagree is a type of scale. You may want to use that in your questions. Okay, short items are best for survey questions. As we talked about earlier, keep it simple. Avoid negative items. When you put a not in there and then you have a scale of agree to disagree, it can get confusing. What is the respondent asked to agree or disagree with when you have a negative statement or one with not in it? Try to avoid that. Avoid biased items and terms. A bias, of course, is any way that questions encourage respondents to answer in a certain way. It's a leading question. It already presents your opinion in the question. So an example would be, don't you agree with the President of the United States that? That's a leading question. You're already implying that you agree with the President. Maybe your respondent doesn't. You don't want to let your bias known to and perhaps influence your respondent. You don't want to do that. A better way to state that same part of a question would be, do you agree or disagree? And agree, disagree, perhaps strongly agree, strongly disagree. Those could be part of the closed-ended answer choices, the responses that you give the survey taker. Okay. These other guidelines you are welcome to look at. SurveyMonkey pretty much sets up your survey for you, I believe. So while these are all great guidelines you should look at, you may not have to really think about all of these in constructing your survey on SurveyMonkey because it's done for you. So let's go to this slide. What order do you put the questions in your survey? Order of questions can affect the answers. Well, like anything else, you want to grab people's attention. You want to draw them into your survey, so you ask the most interesting questions first. What are those questions? The ones that have the dependent variables. And I think it already says in your instructions, right, that you want to do 5 dependent variable questions and then 5 independent variable questions. Right. So the demographic questions, the ones with independent variables, go at the end of your survey. Be sure to include instructions for the questionnaire. Don't just take it for granted that everyone is going to know how to fill it out. Again, SurveyMonkey might do this for you. If not, put in some basic instructions for how to fill out the questionnaire. If your respondents can only choose one answer choice per question, make that clear. And every item must be in the form of a question. For example, what is your gender? Not just gender. Even though you think that's pretty obvious and clear, write it out as a question. And pre-test all or part of the questionnaire. This relates to what I said earlier. Have someone else take your survey before you send it out. Okay, we are going to stop there on the slides. That gives you some good guidelines, some things to watch out for while you are writing up your survey. So again, you send me the link to your survey on SurveyMonkey by midnight Sunday. Then you begin writing your report. Which brings me to another guideline piece of advice for writing your questions. You may want to work backwards through these instructions. Sorry about that. Wanted to make sure my volume was up. You may want to work backwards. You may want to start with the what to write portion of these instructions. Once you know what you have to include in your report, that can influence what you put in your survey. That will ensure that you include everything you need to include in your survey. So you may want to look at that part first and then think up of your survey questions. Work backwards. You can, however, begin writing your report while you're waiting for your classmates to take your survey. So you can write everything in the report except the results and discussion sections. Of course, you won't have your results and you won't be able to discuss them until your classmates take your survey. So late Monday night, September 26th, on our class Blackboard space, I will post the links to your surveys in the Week 4 discussion board. So Week 4, you don't have a discussion this next week. Instead, I post the links to everybody's surveys on the discussion board, and you go in and you click on the links of 10 of your classmates. Now, if you and a classmate work together on your surveys, make sure that your survey is different from your classmate's survey, and it would be a good idea not to take each other's surveys because you've already worked on them together. Fill out surveys by 10 other people you didn't work with on this. This is in bold. Write down the names of each student whose survey you take. Keep track so you can document the work you've done. So you need to take everybody else's surveys, the 10 surveys, by midnight next Wednesday, September 28th. The links in the discussion board will be removed at that time. You will no longer have access to those links, so be sure to have it done by midnight Wednesday. And analyze and print out your own survey's results. SurveyMonkey does a great thing. It tabulates, gives you your results on your surveys. So print them out so you can refer to them as you write your report. Okay, here we are. What do we write in the report? This may have to be a third video, most likely. Okay, so as usual, your report should use APA format, including a cover sheet. An example is in our Blackboard course site, of course. Page numbers, double-spaced, and free of spelling and grammar errors. Proofread, maybe have someone else proofread. Do not write an abstract. Save your paper repeatedly as you write it. Write, I will have you look at all this, but your paper is going to be 8 paragraphs followed by 2 appendices. Again, always a good idea to download this into your own Word document and put spaces in it, space it out so you can read through it better. And ask me any questions you have as you're formatting it. So, in your introduction, you're going to answer these questions. What were you trying to find out in this project? Always start with that in an introduction. What is the purpose of your project? Choosing from the 3 purpose options discussed in class. And why is that an appropriate purpose? Why should people be interested in this topic in your results? It's the big so what question. Why is this interesting? Why do your results matter? Okay, so that's what you're going to include in your first paragraph, the introduction. I'm going to stop here because 15